All right, hi guys, it's Miss Laura again. So we've talked about the big timeline of life, and we are going to go over the timeline of life by era. So this timeline is divided into different colors, you can see, blue and brown and green. The blue period here, this era, is called the Paleozoic period. Brown is the Mesozoic period, and you guys, especially if you did dinosaur camp, you know that because that's where the dinosaurs lived. And then green is Cenozoic. That is the period that we live in, or the era, I'm so sorry, era that we live in. Now, we're actually going to go through this by periods, which is an even shorter distance of time, but we're still talking about a really, really long time. So in the Paleozoic era, we have the Cambrian period, the Ordovician period, the Silurian period, the Devonian period, the Carboniferous period, and the Permian period. We're going to start today with the Cambrian period. The Cambrian period lasted from about, a little bit before, but about 542 million years ago and lasted till 490 million years ago. So that is a long time. The name of the Cambrian period comes from Cambria, which is the old name for Wales, actually, where the first fossils dating back to this period were found. During this period, life only existed in water. There was no life on land at all. The continents covered the same amount of area, so there was the same amount of land, but that land was very barren and rocky. The atmosphere was not great for life, and the chemicals in the atmosphere could not support life yet. And so there wasn't oxygen in the atmosphere, and so there wasn't a lot. Anyway, it all lived in the water. Algae was really plentiful in the water. I've got a card here for seaweed and algae. But actually, the dominant form of life in the water turned out to be the trilobite. And this actually evolved about, looks like about halfway through the Cambrian period. Trilobites multiplied in great numbers. They were found in a huge variety of forms. Some had, this is crazy, some of them had a dozen eyes. Some had no eyes. Some had enormous heads. Some had no heads. The largest of these was about 18 inches long, so that's 1.5 feet, which is pretty big sized. The smallest ones were maybe about this big. That's like, what, an inch? They belonged to arthropods. And their name comes from their 3 lobes, trilobite, lobe, bite. And the 3 lobes were the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Now you might know some other animals that have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. Insects have those 3 parts as well. But they actually developed separately from trilobites. That's where they get their name. The trilobites began to disappear after the ice age that was at the end of the Cambrian period, but they didn't go away entirely. They actually took much longer than that to go extinct entirely. There were also all kinds of other invertebrate life in the seas. Jellyfish evolved at this time. Sea anemones came about at this time. 2 developments in the Cambrian period are particularly important, and one is the development of sponges. Now, on our chart, sponges are in the Ordovician period, and that's because this particular kind of coral and sponge developed in the Ordovician period. I'm going to put our card here in Cambrian, though, because that's when other sponges first appeared, and it's just the only card we have. These sponges didn't actually kind of get past where they live, what they were like in the Cambrian period. So sponges that we have today are very similar to the sponges that developed in the Cambrian period. They didn't ever have, their cells never formed specialized tissue or organs, and so they never developed muscles or nerves or sense organs like the ability to taste or feel things. They just don't have that other forms of animal life have. The second big development in the Cambrian period that I want to talk about is the appearance of armor on animals. An example of this is the mollusk. This is the best name for a mollusk I've ever seen. It's called the Wiwaxia. So you guys should all use that in your everyday dialogue, Wiwaxia. The Wiwaxia was a mollusk. Mollusks are cool because they had this armor on the outside of their bodies. Other examples here, we've got these guys with shells. We've got the, trying to read this upside down. Anomalocaris. Yep, there you go. This event of having armor on the outside of your body became really important in the succeeding ages because that armor developed into exoskeletons for invertebrates, and eventually it turned into the skeletons of vertebrates as well. So it's a really important development. The climate of the Cambrian period was subtropical to tropical all over the entire world, and there were not distinguishable seasons. So that's the Cambrian period. And that lasted until about 490 million years ago, and then we go into the Ordovician period, which we'll talk about next.